This video is going to cover the basics of writing a cover letter. So before we get started, we have to address a really common misconception, and that is that cover letters are unnecessary. There are definitely people who think this, and recruiters and hiring managers are definitely some of the people who buy into that. But there are also a lot of recruiters and hiring managers who really value the information that they find in cover letters. So because of that, it's a lot of a safer bet to make sure that you actually write a cover letter and know that it might not get read by someone than it is to not write a cover letter and hope that nobody cares. So when we think about cover letters, we have to think about what a cover letter's purpose is when we're sending them into our job or internship applications. So cover letters can serve as a writing sample for employers. So when we write them, we need to make sure that it's really well written, it's convincing, it's concise where it needs to be, and that it's error-free, right? We don't want any kind of mistakes in our writing sample if an employer is going to use that as a judgment on our communication skills. We also want to make sure that we're not regurgitating our resume. Employers are already seeing that. They don't need to see the exact same information again. And so one way that I think of resumes and cover letters going together, I think about, an application together as a picture book where the resume is the words, it's telling me what's going on, but the cover letter is the illustration. It's really the picture. It tells me in depth what is going on and helps me get a better idea and understanding of what the words are and what's going on in your experience. Another way I think about writing a cover letter is like the good old hamburger method that I used when I was in late elementary school and probably early middle school as well. So if it's familiar with you, that's great. If not, it's okay. We're going to kind of cover the basics of it. But when we think about writing a cover letter, it does have some similarities to writing that 5 paragraph essay because it starts with a thesis or that topic introduction, right? You have to tell me, hey, I'm qualified for this job. And that's what your thesis is in this situation. You have to back it up with evidence where you tell me how you know that you're qualified for the position you're applying for. And then you need to conclude, right? And whether or not you knew the hamburger method, odds are that you probably kind of do this when you're writing papers for classes, even though you might not have ever known that's kind of what you're following. So we also think about these kind of 4 things that we need to include. So even though we're talking about the hamburger method, you might not follow that exactly, but those are kind of the general ideas of what's going on. In a cover letter, we also need to include kind of these things. So we need to include an introduction. This is where we tell, employers, hey, I'm qualified. That's where we put our thesis. Our why you, that's where all that evidence goes. So this is where we're telling them more about our experience. We have to add in a why them, and this doesn't necessarily fit great within the hamburger method, but we do need to make sure that we're making our cover letter specific and we're telling an employer, hey, I'm really invested in you. I'm really invested in this position at your company, because writing that general cover letter that can be used for every company isn't really going to be beneficial. And then we do need to make sure we conclude, we bring it back to our thesis, our introduction, and remind an employer that we are indeed qualified for the position we're applying for. So what do we put in our introduction for a cover letter? This is where we express our interest in this specific position at this specific company. If you can mention those things by name in your first paragraph, it's going to show to me, hey, you are actually writing this cover letter just for me. You might choose to refer to any personal contacts, especially if you know that they are really well respected at the company that you're applying for. You don't want to mention somebody who maybe didn't have a great relationship with that company, but if you know they're still there, they're happy, everybody's happy with them, definitely a good idea to mention some personal contacts. It's a really good idea in this introduction, and this is probably the most important thing, is that you briefly highlight how you meet the top 3 things in their job description. So if you're looking at the job description and they need you to have, certain technical skills, or they want you to have certain, transferable skills, make sure that you're mentioning that you meet those things in the introduction. And that's because this is your hook. This is what's going to get me motivated to read the rest of your cover letter. And if you don't convince me that you could be qualified in your first paragraph, there is absolutely no incentive for me to keep reading your letter. So this is a super important thing. So then when we talk about this why you section, and this is really where we give our evidence, right? So we need to, without repeating our resume, give really specific examples of how we're going to fit with the company, with the position. And this is really that chance to tell that story, paint that picture, and illustrate for an employer how we meet what they're looking for. So when you think about that, you want to think about what experiences and skills do you have that make you a great candidate, and not just a great candidate in general, but a great candidate for this specific position. And that's, I keep coming back to this, but it's because, when you're writing that cover letter, it should be tailored for each internship and or job. And each job and internship is going to have specific things in their job description that make them different from the other jobs that you're applying for. So you want to make sure that it is really specific to the position that you're writing that cover letter for. Again, you want to make sure to keep the focus on what you have to offer the company, not what the company can do for you, right? So it's not, oh, hey, this company's in my hometown. It means I don't have to spend money on rent. I can live with my parents. It really is, what do you have to offer the company? What's in your skill set and your background that you can carry with you into a job or an internship with them? We also need to address the why them. And the way that this is structured, you might think that you have to kind of follow the introduction, why you, why them, and a conclusion. In reality, I've seen people work why them into basically any other paragraph. So sometimes people will work it into their introduction or their conclusion. Sometimes they'll kind of weave that into when they're talking about why you, they'll weave that together. It doesn't usually matter, but it does need to be in your cover letter somewhere. In this section, wherever you decide to put it, you want to make sure that you showcase your research on the company. This is really a chance to show off and maybe come off maybe stronger than some of the other applicants, because you can say, hey, I've spent some time, I've looked into you, and I know some things about you. Which can sound kind of creepy, but really you're trying to show off that you've invested some time already and that you are really serious about this position. So we've talked about, in the why you section, you need to showcase how you're a good fit for this specific position, this specific company. But now this is more about the motivation. This is the why. What about this specific company is drawing you to them? What about the specific position? But anything you can work in there is a really good idea to include. And then additionally, this is your chance to really impress the employer. It show that it's more than just a job. So that's why it's so important to showcase your research and be specific about why you want to work at this company. Then we have to wrap up our cover letter, and we do this with our conclusion. So this is a perfect time to kind of restate that thesis, call back to those 3 things that you said, hey, this is how I'm qualified for your job, and then the evidence that you gave to support those 3 things. Really good idea to call back to that in this conclusion, this final paragraph. You want to make sure that you express interest in moving forward in the process. You may choose to restate your contact information if you'd like to do that. And then last but not least, you do want to make sure that you thank the employer for their time. As an applicant, you always want to come off as grateful and show as much gratitude as you possibly can. And it's just a really good idea to thank them for the time that they've spent. Even if it's not going to get you anywhere, it's always nice. And people will really value and appreciate that. So some other tips for success that we have in mind: we want to make sure that we submit a cover letter every time we submit a resume. The exception would be if a company is asking only for your resume, then you don't need to send a cover letter. But if they've like explicitly said, only give me your resume, then you want to make sure you only do that. But otherwise, it's a really good idea to send a cover letter anytime you're submitting a resume. You want to make sure that your cover letter is only 1 page. This is kind of a formatting thing. You want to make sure that you're being concise and to the point. You still need to paint a picture. You still need to tell me how your experience matches this job description, but you want to make sure that it's done in an effective way. Again, focus on what you can do for the company, not what the company can do for you. I've said that a couple times, but it's because it's super important. I would recommend you write each cover letter from scratch. This makes sure that you don't send a cover letter that you wrote for Deloitte to EY on accident, right? And you left the word Deloitte somewhere in there and you didn't catch it, right? So if you start from scratch, you're making sure that you're talking about skills and experiences that are unique to that job description. You're not, missing a job title or a company name somewhere in a paragraph, because that can be a really good way for them to, throw you out from considerations. It's always a good idea to make sure that you're starting from scratch. And then you do want to focus on what's in the job description. Focus on the core skills in those job descriptions, use them to your advantage, and outline how you need them, right? So we really want to make sure that we're matching the job description. We're saying, hey, you want this, this, and this, and I have this, this, and this. And then finally, last but not least, do not regurgitate your resume. I know I've already said that, but they already have your resume. They do not need to see it again. They really want to see more and to hear more from you. So don't regurgitate that resume. We also want to talk about formatting a cover letter because it is a little bit different than you might be used to. So cover letters are formatted traditionally as a business letter, which means all content is left aligned. So when we look, we can see this kind of example, right? Our contact information, if we're the blue blob, comes first, and then we put the date. The person that we're writing the letters to, contact information should come next, and then we're going to address them, and then the content's going to start, and all of it is left aligned. But instead of including our name and contact information in that left aligned manner, like we do have up here, we might choose to use the heading from our resume. And I really like that look. I think it makes it look like you're kind of building that professional brand. It looks like the documents go together, which means if, someone's printing something out and they're scattered all over their desk, they can find, oh, these two go together. So I think that's a nice look. It doesn't need to be done, but you do want to make sure that you're following the business format otherwise. If you want to talk more about career development topics, we have some resources here. So you can check Handshake for details on our upcoming events. For those of you that are watching this before the Spring Career Fair in 2020, our virtual Spring Career Fair is the 23rd of February from 2 to 5 p.m. It will be virtual via the Handshake Career Fair platform, which some of you may already be familiar with, which is great. If you want additional guidance on a resume or a cover letter, you should schedule a resume or cover letter appointment in Handshake, which you can do. The link is included there. And then I would also recommend that you connect with us on social media. I know that you all are getting lots of emails, as you always do. So if you want to give us a follow, you'll get some good reminders about our key events so that you're not missing out on anything. Thanks so much for watching this video, and please get in touch if you have any questions.